Hey guys, so I'm going to go over the questions that are on the bottom of page 23. If you need a little bit of help, I'll do the questions and then you can see where you're struggling a little bit. Okay, so number 1 is about the lowest freezing point. Remember that we can change freezing point by adding something ionic, and the more ions, the more the freezing point will change. Okay, so notice that in all of these choices, the grams are the same. That means it doesn't matter if they're all identical. Same thing, the amount of water is all the same, so I also don't care about that, right? So what I want to do is I want to compare what's in here, and I want to figure out which one has the most ions. So first I need to see, are all of these ionic? B is not ionic. These two are both nonmetals, so B is not even going to dissociate. It will not become an ion at all. It is covalent. Okay, so for the remaining choices, we want to count the ions. So in A, I have one K and one I ion. Altogether, that gives me a total of 2 ions. Okay, so let's see if the other two beat that. In choice C, there are 2 K ions, and then SO4 is one whole piece. Altogether, that gives me 3 ions. So that one already beats A, so it can't be that one. Let's compare C and D. So if I look at letter D, I've got 3 Na ions. PO4 is one whole chunk, but there's only one of those. But adding all of that up, 3 plus 1, this one has 4 ions. That means it is the best. It will affect the temperature the most and make the freezing point go down as low as possible. Okay, I'm going to look at number 2. In number 2, I am looking for the lowest freezing point. So again, we know that we can affect that by having more ions. Okay? Notice that it says they all have 1 liter of water. Well, if that's the same, then it doesn't matter. Okay? We need to then figure out, well, which ones of these things are ionic. Remember, ionic means a metal and a nonmetal, or a polyatomic ion. A and B are all nonmetals. That means that they're not going to dissociate, they're not going to make any ions at all. So you automatically can cross those off. So we just have to decide between C and D. Okay, so in C, let's count the ions. There's one Li ion, and then there's one Br ion. Altogether, that gives me 2. But notice that it tells me how many moles I have. We're going to multiply by that. Okay, so I ran out of room. 2 times 0.1, that gives me a total of 0.2 moles of ions. Let's compare that with the number for letter D. If I count the ions in letter D, I have 1 calcium ion, and then there are 2 chlorine ions. Altogether, that gives me 3. But then we need to multiply by the moles of that as well, times 0.2. So again, I ran out of room. If I multiply there, I get 0.6 moles of ions. You want to have more ions. Choice D is bigger, so that will have the biggest effect on the freezing point. Okay, so number 3 is about the boiling and freezing point. So we know that freezing point gets depressed, which means it goes down. And the boiling point is elevated, which means that it will go up. So if I have a solution of water and calcium chloride, adding that calcium chloride is going to do this. So I want to find a choice that says the freezing point has gone down and the boiling point has been elevated. So that is choice D. So it says freezing point is lower and boiling point is higher. Oh, I skipped one. Okay, I'm going to try number 4. I want to know which one would cause the greatest elevation in the boiling point. The way that we're going to do that is by adding something ionic, and we want to have more ions because that will make the boiling point increase more. So first you want to check, is everything in here ionic? The answer is yes, all 4 choices are ionic. So what we need to do is count the ions and then take into account the molarity. So if I look at choice A, there's 1 NH4 ion. This is 1 whole ion because it's a polyatomic ion. Okay? You also have 1 whole NO3 ion. Altogether, that's 2 of them. But they give me a concentration, so I'm going to multiply by that. Altogether, that gives me 0.2 moles of ions. So we're going to compare and see which other ones can beat that. Again, we want the highest number because we're looking for the biggest change. Okay? If I count the ions in letter B, I have 1 Al, and then I have 3 fluorine ions. Altogether, I have 4 ions, but then we want to multiply by the molarity that was given. So 4 times 0.2, that gives me 0.8 moles of ions. Okay? So far, B is winning over A, so we're going to cross that one out. Okay? Let's see how C and D compare. Okay? If I count over here, I have 1 calcium ion, and I have 2 chlorine ions. Altogether, that's 3, but times the 0.3 of the molarity that was given. That gives me 0.9 moles of ions. Okay? So right now, C has more ions than letter B, so that means that eliminates that choice. We have to check letter D to get through it all. Okay? In letter D, we're going to count the ions. There's 1 Na ion, and there's 1 chloride ion. That gives me 2 of them, but you have to multiply by the molarity. So 2 times 0.4, that gives me 0.8 moles. So C compared to D, C is the winner because it's the biggest number. Okay? So number 5 is about why is road salt used on the icy roads in winter. So during the winter, the reason that we have ice is because it has frozen. Okay? So what we know about salt and frozen things is that when you add salt to the water, the freezing point will decrease. Okay? So we don't care about the boiling point because it's winter time. So it can't be the boiling point questions. While it's true, it doesn't matter in winter. And we know that what the road salt does is it lowers the freezing point of the water, and so it's harder for ice to form and mess up our cars. Last one. So we're going to compare these solutes. So let's count and figure out how many ions, and which one will have the greatest effect. This means that we're looking to have more ions formed because that will change the boiling point more. Okay? So first we have to figure out which ones are ionic and which ones aren't. These 2 are ionic. C6H12O6 is not ionic. It's covalent. What that means is it is not going to dissociate. It is not going to split into ions at all. Automatically out. So we're going to compare between NaCl and CaCl2. It tells me equal amounts, so I just have to count the ions that are present. Okay? I have 1 Na ion here, and I have 1 chlorine ion. That gives me a total of 2 ions. CaCl2, there's 1 calcium ion. There are 2 chlorine ions. Altogether, that gives me 3 ions. Since we want the greatest effect, we want more ions. That means CaCl2 is our winner. So it can't be A. The reason why we chose CaCl2 as the winner is because we were looking for the most ions. So B is your answer. Alright, I hope that helps. If you still have more questions, don't be afraid to come and ask.